In this video, we will create a sample React app with Node.js as the backend, and we will use Passport as the authentication middleware in Node.js. So in the previous video, we had seen how to use Passport with Node.js, and here we will create a front end also with React and also see what other issues come up while doing it so that this app works end to end. So let's start with the definition of the app. Develop an app with front-end in React, backend with Node.js and Passport, and the app has the following REST APIs: post/user, which will log in the user and generate the token. Remember, these are exactly the APIs that we had created in the previous lesson, where we had seen how to integrate Node with Passport. So if you have not seen that, just go ahead and see it and it will help you. So post/user, then we had get/user to get the details of the logged in user, else error. Get my orders, orders of the logged in user, else error. Get all orders if user role is admin. So we had defined two strategies: strategy all and strategy role, strategy admin. So all orders was only for strategy admin. Then what were we saying? Passport uses JWT as strategy. So the strategy we want is JSONWebTokens with the token in header authorization with keyword bearer. So we will send the token in the request, in the get requests, in the header field authorization with the keyword bearer. When we are first issuing the token at the server, we will send the token from the server in three different ways: as a response in the post/login, in a header authorization in post/login. So in the response in the header also we can send it in the field authorization, or in the field xauth token in post/login. So this is our objective, and let's start doing it. So the first thing we will start is with our backend, the Node backend. So what are the changes required there? So we had created this Node backend. This was the file we had created while we had integrated Passport with Node, and we had used the strategy of JWT. Also, we had used this data2.js, which had the users and which had the username and password and the role and the list of orders. So very simple data that we had used. So in the first approach, we will send the response in the payload. So we can just say response.send token. So this was the token we had generated from the JWT, and we will just send it. Let me just start the server. Now what do we need to do on the front end? So let's go to our React app. So what we have created is the sample React app, which has these components: login, logout, user for displaying the details of the user, orders for displaying all the orders, whether they are my orders or all orders. So which is why the route path is /order/type. So where type can be my or all. And these are the components defined. So the first component we are handling is login. Let's see what are the changes we need to make to login. So here we have a basic skeleton code wherein we have a form with a username and a password. So here when the submit button is clicked, it is calling this post data with the URL, which is /user, and this data. So we have the object. We have also defined this HTTP service, which we have imported as HTTP, and HTTP service that we have been using standard is it gives us these get and post functions. So in the login, let us now define our post data. So we can just say let response equal to await http.post, and we call it with the URL and object. Then we can just get the data from the response is equal to response, and let's just do a console.log. Login data is data. Now, once we have gotten the data, what do we need to do? Typically, in this kind of a scenario, we will try and put it in the local storage because we need to store that token. So let's go to our local storage and try and see what do we want to do in our local storage. So in our local storage, we will need the get and the store token and the remove token. So these are the typical three functionalities we need. So let's construct it. Const key name is equal to say JWT token. Let's define these functions. Function get token, return local storage dot get item, and the key name. That's our get. Similarly, we would have our function, say let's call it store token. It takes a token as parameter and it will just store it. Local storage dot set item, the key name and the value. And the third is to clear the, so let's call it remove token. Local storage dot remove item and the key name. And let's just export these functions. So export and what all do we want to export? Get token, store token and remove token. So we have created our auth service. Let's go back to our login. So now in our login, what do we want to do? Once we have gotten the token, then what do we want to do? We will just need to store it. So we have imported our auth service as auth. So we can just set auth dot store token. And what is the token? It is the data that we have received. So we have stored this token, and then we can just say this dot props dot history dot push and say we want to go to slash user. So once we have logged in, we will see the details of that user. If there was an error, so let's just put this into a try catch. And if we get an exception, what do we do? Let's just do a console.log of the ex.response. Let's create an error message. ex.response.status text. So we will get the text and this from the response. Once we have done that, let's just set it standard thing so that we can render it. This dot set state error message is error message. So let's just set it in the state so that it's visible to the user. If you have set it in the state, let's also integrate it here. Let error message is equal to this dot state. So in this case, if it was successful, we would have gone to a different page, a different URL. Otherwise, we will keep on displaying this and we can just display it here. How do we display it? Error message. If error message is truthy, then what do? We just say put it in a H5 and we display the error message. So we put it out here. Now this is our login. So now in our login, this should work. So we have gotten it, we have put it in our that. Now next, if we go to our user, then in our user, the other side expects the token to come as the JWT. We will need to authenticate the user. So how do we do that? So in our get user here, we are just calling get user. So what do we do? So the standard approach we will do is in our get URL, in our HTTP, let's make a slight change. So instead of doing a return like this, let's send the token in the header also. And how do we do that? We can say, let's first import auth from auth service. Let's get the token. Let token is equal to auth dot get token. Once we have gotten the token, let's call the service axios dot get. The URL is the same. There is no change. And also what we are sending, we will be sending a header. Headers is, what's the name of the header we wanted to send it in is authorization. And what is the value? We wanted bearer space and then the token. So this is the value we wanted to send. So in our get requests, we are sending this in the header. So that is how we have configured it. The post remains the same. Once we have sent it, the user will work the same way. And what we are doing is we are just getting the data for the user, either setting it in the state, or if we have the error message, we are just setting it in the state. And let's also display it. Are we displaying the error message? We are displaying the error message. Either we are displaying the user details or the error message. So this is perfectly fine. We will come to orders and those later. Let's test it just for the user first. So here in the console, let's sign in with say John. Now that's a correct sign in. So we get in the login data, we get a token, but here we are getting an access to HTML request, and this has been blocked by CORS policy. Request header field is not authorized. This authorization field is not allowed in our pre-flight response. So that's the error we get. This is a standard error you will get. So how do we handle this? So to handle this error, let us go back to our server, and in the server where we configure typically our headers, we will need to control access control allow headers. We will need to also allow authorization here. So this header field has to be allowed. That is what the error message said. If we read it again, request header field authorization is not allowed by access control allow headers. So in our access control allow headers, we have now allowed our header. Let's log in again. Let's restart the server. Let's go to our login. Let's log in again with John. And now you can see this error has gone. So now we have gotten the details, user ID 1, John is and customer. And if we go into the application, storage, local storage, we can see we have this JWT token and the token that we got from the server set here. So we have created that, and now in the get request, we sent it as part of the header, the HTTP service that we have built handled it. Now we need to handle our my orders and our logout. So let's do that. Let's first implement by logout. So what should logout do? It should just do auth.remove token. If we remove the token, so the next time the token will not go, and hence the server will not handle it. So that's how we handle that. Let's go ahead and test it. So now if I click on logout, you can see this token has been removed. And now if I go to the user, I get a 401 unauthorized because now the token was not sent, and hence Passport said that this user is not authorized, and we got a 401 unauthorized. If we log in again, we get that, we get the token, or everything is working fine. We do a logout and this is fine. Now what remains is orders. Let's handle our orders. So in our orders, in our component did mount or our component did update, we are calling this function get orders data to get the data from the server and just setting it in the orders and displaying all the orders. Why do we need component did mount and did update here? Why not only one? Because we have this parameter coming out of it, which is all or my. So let's first get the parameter in this function. Let type is equal to this dot params dot match this dot props dot match dot params. Once we have gotten the type, let's construct our URL. URL is equal to, if type is equal to my, then it will be slash my orders. Otherwise it will be slash all orders. So these are the two things we are doing here. Next, what do we need to do? We just need to get the data. So let me put it in a try catch. Let response equal to await http dot get URL. Remember, the token will be sent by the HTTP service in the headers. We don't need to do that. Let's get the data equal to response. Let's just console.log data, and we will do a this dot set state orders is data. And if we have defined an error message, let's just make it null. Why are we making it null will become clear in a moment. And in our exception, what do? Let's just console.log ex.response. And like we did in the logout, let's construct our error message. Let error message is equal to ex.response.status and then the status text. ex.response.status text, and we set it in the state. This dot set state error message is error message. So the reason we are making it null, that earlier the error message could have been set up, and if we go through an update, we would need it null. Otherwise the error message is not getting updated even although we have received the correct data. Let's also display the error message here. So orders comma error message, and we can just display it as error message and h5. So we have displayed the error message. Let's go back and see if we test it. So there is no user. Let's log in again. John. So we get the user. If we go on my orders, we get all the orders for John. If I go to all orders, now remember John was not an admin, so we get a 401 undefined, but we are getting the orders here also. Why is that happening? Let's correct that. So if we get an error, then our orders should be an empty array, which is what they were earlier. So the same issue. Let's test it now. So my orders is fine, and if I go to all orders, I just get a 401 undefined. Why did I get an undefined, not a unauthorized because we made it test rather than text. Now it should be fine. We are getting a 401 unauthorized. So user is getting the user details. My orders are getting the order details. On this all orders, because John was not an admin, we get an unauthorized. Let's log out and log in with, say, admin Tim. So we have Tim and the role is admin. If I go to my orders, there are no orders, so it's not showing because for Tim there were no orders. For all orders, we are getting that data, and this is now working perfectly fine. So this is what we needed to do as a response in post/user. We sent the token and we were able to use it. Remember, we got the error for the preflight, course preflight, which is how we solved it. We put it in the access control allow headers, we put authorization. So if you get that error, which you will, remember to make this change so that it works. Next, what do we want to do? Instead of the token going in the response in post/user, it will go in a header authorization in post/user. So from the server, we will send it in the header. So how do we do that? Let's go ahead and do it. So in the server, we need to make that change first. So here, instead of sending the token, let's just send the payload. And the token, how do we do? Rest.set header. What is the name of it? Authorization. And we will put the token. So we have sent the token in the response, in the header. Once we have done that, where do we need to make a change? We will need to go to our login. And in our login, what do we need to do? We will need to, instead of taking the token from the response, we will need to take it from the header of the response rather than the data. So let's call it header key is equal to, what was it? Authorization. So remember, whenever we are reading it, instead of an uppercase, all of them are lowercase. This is very, very important. Don't make it uppercase here. Just make it lowercase. So this authorization here is lowercase. So we now need to, in the response, pick up the headers. So how do we pick up the headers? So let data comma headers. So from the response, we will also read the headers is equal to response. And then we can get the token. Let token is equal to headers. And what was the name of the header key? So this is how we have gotten the stuff. Let's also put a console.log for the token. Token is token. And we will call the store token on this token. So this is what we have done. So now we have gotten the token, we have read the token, and the rest should work as it is. So because only for the first time this change is happening, let's go ahead and test it. Let's restart the server. We have cleared, there is no login. Now if I say login with John, what you can see here is that the token is undefined. Now why is the token undefined? Let's try and debug it. So one way to debug is that let's just do a console.log of the response. And see whether we got the header in it or not. Let's test it. So if we go to login, let's just log in with John. So in the headers, we got the content length, content type, and this. We did not get that header. Now, why did we not get that header? So the reason for it is that just like for sending the header from the client, we had to put it in access control allow headers. For the server to be able to send this header, we will need to put it in response.header access control expose header. So all the headers that we want to allow from the server to be sent, we will need to put it here. And what's the name of the field in the header? Authorization. So this is a change we will need to do. Let's make this change and test it again. We are restarting the server. Let's go to our login. John. And now you can see we have gotten the token and the user is working fine. If I go to my orders, I get all the orders. If I go to logout, I get a 401 unauthorized, and this is working fine. So this is the change we had to do in our server for the response. If we want to send a field in the header, we need to configure it in access control expose headers. For the client or the browser to send it, we need to configure it in access control allow headers, which is what we had done earlier, and now we have configured it here. So this is working fine. Let's test it for an admin also. So let's log out first and then go to login. Tim. So we get Tim. Orders, there are no orders. All orders we get it, and this is working fine. What was the third? In a header, XAuth token. So instead of the header field being called authorization, the header field will be called XAuth token, and rest is the same. So these are two standard header names that are used typically in authorization, which the server sends it. So which is why we are doing that. So now if it is XAuth token, let's go to the server and make the change. So what should this be? XAuth token. And where do we need to make the other change? Let's restart the server. In our login, we will take it as XAuth token. Note, I am putting it in lowercase. So this is the header field. So we have configured it both places. Let's go ahead and test it. Login. Let's log in with John. And we haven't gotten a token. In the header, we don't have the header. Now, why is that happened? Again, the same error in our expose headers. Allow access control expose headers instead of X authorization. Now I need to put it as XAuth token. That's the name we had given it. Let's check it. XAuth token. So we need to configure it here. Now let me restart the server. Let's log in again. And now if we look at the headers, you can see you're getting the XAuth token. And notice this is lowercase. So always keep that in mind. If I go to my orders, that's working fine. All orders is fine. In the application, if we look at it, we have gotten the token. And this is perfectly fine. So an important thing while keeping this in mind, and these are errors that come very frequently and you need to handle it. For the header sent by the server, what node is sending, in the response, we need to configure access control expose headers. So if the server in the response is sending a header field, configure it here. For the headers sent by the browser or the client in the request, in our HTTP service where we are sending it, configure access control allow headers. So we configured in the last case authorization in access control allow headers and the XAuth token in access control expose headers. Where do we configure it? We configure it here. So in our app.use here, which is the standard where we put in our other configurations, remember to make these change. These are typical errors we get and they take a lot of time to debug. So remember these things. Failure to do so will give you a coarse preflight error. So if you don't do it for the stuff being sent by the client, the browser, you will typically get a coarse preflight error. If you don't do it in the server, the field is not will not be visible. So these are two standard ways to debug it. Remember them, and because this is a very common error, so the moment you remember how to, if you get this error message, you know what's happened, you will be able to solve it. Or if you're not getting the header, just print the response on the console and you will see, okay, header is missing, most probably this is the error, let me just go ahead and correct it. So here we have created a very simple app, but we have seen how it works end to end between a React, the HTTP service, and the server, and whatever other configurations are required.